For me, it's a great honor to be with you. I'm a communicator. I often have to go in front of cameras, but you are working in the field. You are the grassroots. You are the ones who inspire me when I go in front of a microphone. So thank you very much for everything you do. I'll show you a couple of examples. I could show examples of everything you do, but during 1 hour, I will just show you some things that particularly struck me, something I fell in love with during the last few months on the theme of the Christian family and the media. You know, the happy pretext of this meeting is the 20th anniversary of the letter to the families of John Paul II. Well, 20 years ago, there's another anniversary we're celebrating. 20 years ago, I was making my first steps as a media professional. So let's watch this. I told her that she's not interested, but you weren't sufficiently interested for you to go to bed with her. It's not true. I didn't go to bed with her. You're lying. You're a jerk. So, as you can see, that was my contribution to the Christian family 20 years ago. The hair has changed. You see a lot of difference. A lot of things change over 20 years. I remember I was trying to find my way, my path. In those days, that was an experience that enabled me to see that the art world is fascinating, but I was a passionate person, but I also had a pragmatic side to me. I wanted to mix the communication aspect with the analytical aspect, with some marketing, communications, public relations, and I would never have thought that I could end up working for the church. Amélie told you a little bit. I started with humor, stand-up comics. The first year of the Québec Humor Festival, Le Grand Rire, the big laughter. I loved my job. I was working with Sylvain Parent-Bédard, who's still a great friend, and he orders Céline Dion and Madonna, names like that, on the Plains of Abraham. But I was still in a spiritual search, in a spiritual quest. And since I had a contract during the winter with the Diocese of Quebec, I discovered the World Youth Days. And it was so strong, I said bye-bye to my boss to apply on a position in the promotion of the World Youth Day nationally. I got the job. It changed my life. I say it with a lot of pride. I'm now part of the John Paul II generation, the World Youth Days generation. I found there a spiritual family and the desire to be a witness. I feel that around the room here, there are a lot of people who have had strong spiritual experiences. That's why you want to bear witness. How can you bear witness with the media, in the media? I will show you several examples, several witnesses today. When I finished my experience with World Youth Days, I worked for Salt and Light. One of the reports I liked the most, it was to discover, I don't know if you were there, in 2008 there was a symposium on the theology of the body with Yves Semen, who will come back to Quebec City next fall. And this report is still this news report is still online. At the time, the Archbishop of Montreal, Monseigneur Lépine, was a simple priest, and he gave a witness which touched me a lot. I like a lot the theology of the body ever since then, and I like to share this with people. The family, to me, when I was asked to speak about the Christian family in the media, first there was this total absence of anything. Where is the Christian family? You got to look for it, but it's nowhere to be found. It's nil. I can't find anything. If you are looking for the model of yesteryear, the perfect ideal family of the 1950s, or the type of families you can find in image databases, it might be difficult to find it today. But the Christian family, and I like this remark by Antoine Renard, is something that's always evolving. We're always on a quest. And I see in different places these testimonials, which are not always explicitly Christian, what you're there in the media. So today I will show you a resolutely positive testimonial. We're realistic. It's difficult to do that, but there's a lot of reasons to hope. In these testimonials, having the strength to go forward, sometimes it goes through sufferings, these wounds, these hard times that force us to bear witness. I don't know if you saw in the social media an absolutely wonderful testimonial on social media. There's a young family who had a child with anencephalia. Anencephalia, let's start the video and let it roll. Maybe you've seen this. The child has no cranium, no skull, and a part of the brain is missing. Of course, the family was suggested to abort the child. It's a family that was a Christian family, and they decided to film the whole thing, not because they wanted to be exhibitionistic, but they knew that this child would live only a couple of hours, a couple of days at the most, but they knew that this would be a strong witness. With the grace of the Holy Spirit, they documented the whole thing, and this is a video that has been circulating for some years now. It got to me only a few weeks ago, and you see in a very simple way the mom, Grace and James Walter, with the child who lived 8 hours only. But it's very plain and simple, but it was 8 hours of love. This video was a very plain and simple video, understated. When I saw this video, I shared it with a lot of my friends. I know that many of my friends in social networks are more Catholic and Christian than others, but I have a lot of friends, Facebook friends, who are atheists or agnostic. A lot of them shared with me this exceptional experience of this family who knew that this child would have only a few hours to live, and still they gave him love. Those were parents who already had some children, and for them it was a way to grow. And the child is still alive through the social networks. So 2 years later, the video has become viral, or not viral, but it's still there. And every time people see this video, usually they share the video. So that's a way among many others. Of course, this doesn't fall down from heaven. Those were people who, it's not by chance, these people had a deep faith, and they said, let's bear witness to that faith. But there's a lot of emotion here. And people are happy to be able to see such testimonials that give them hope. The conversations I had about that later on, people start wondering, abortion, it would be totally natural to abort a child who would only live a few hours. What type of dignity does this child have? Well, he had the best possible dignity. He was loved as, and no child can be better loved than that. So I'd like to invite you to watch this video in full at home. Another testimonial is the one by Louise Brissette. I don't know if you know her. She lives in Saint-Anselme, close to the Beauce region in the Chaudière-Appalaches. It's not the standard family model. Of course, she adopted more than 37 children. The last figure I have is 37. It might be a bit more now. And what touches me a lot with her is that you see here in one of these reports, she's spoken of as a great humanist. And the greatest Christians are the greatest humanists sometimes. She's never afraid of speaking about her faith in God. But of course, she doesn't stamp that on her forehead and doesn't make a show of it. But people, when they hear her speak, they say there must be something. Adopting 37 children, how can you explain that? And then the faith, the witness of faith comes slowly and gradually. It touches Louise Brissette and all the volunteers that gravitate around her. It's a model of a Christian family through adoption. Children who, very often orphans, others who still have some relationships with the natural parents. And there's a very, very strong witness that's present there. Of course, another great witness is the one given by what happened in l'Île Verte and in Lac Mégantic, the worst possible suffering. And it's around the church that the mourning was done. You could see pastors, priests like Steve Labbé in Lac Mégantic, these families who went through the worst trial that you can imagine, and with a deep faith, they gave witness in the church. And we can clearly say that there's something we don't understand. And in a society which is supposed to be secular, they are proud to be secular. We know it's a pluralistic society, actually, but the state is secular. All the media went through very well, both in l'Île Verte as well as in Lac Mégantic. The Christian family touched the hearts. Of course, we don't have the monopoly. We Christians, we don't have the monopoly of the family. We don't have the monopoly of having very edifying actions and suffering. I don't know if you heard about what happened in a decoration show on Canal V called Let's Erase Everything and Start from Scratch. On s'efface et on recommence. There's this young mother who fell gravely ill. It was a couple who was living without being married, and they decided to marry at the hospital just before the death of the mom. And a lot of hearts were touched. But, of course, the funeral didn't take place in the church and so things like that. We don't know in the conscience, in the hearts of these people, how the Holy Spirit touched them. Because even with people who are not, I think they were probably baptized, they had something that was deeply buried, they had deep roots. And this testimonial, which was not directly Christian as such, touched a whole lot of people. Now, I would like to speak to you about another point. It's the context in which we work when we want to share the Christian family in the media. Last January, Celine Dion gave a long interview to the Toronto Star. I invite you to read it in full. She spoke about her faith. They asked her, are you Catholic or what? And then she take a brief pause. She was silent. She told the story of her mother, who, after the 8th child, this famous story that we constantly hear again and again, a priest said, when will be the next child, And Madame Dion, if there's no more children, you're not welcome in the church. Can you imagine? She was in shock. Her mom had a very strong reaction, and there were scars that were left. It's the same Celine Dion who spoke for the Pope at the Olympic Stadium, who married with René Angelil in the Eastern Catholic Rite. But you saw that this wound was still there. And various wounds, you know them. You know these wounds. Each time we speak about our faith, there are people who are deeply wounded. And we always have to think about the excluded. I like a lot Pope Francis, who always reminds us of this opening to the peripheries, to the excluded people. And when we speak among ourselves, we should always imagine that these people who are in the margins should feel welcomed. You certainly know that this week in Quebec City, it's the end of a class action which lasted almost 6 months against the Redemptorists. In this case, there's only one priest that was accused criminally. But we know in the history of the church, there's been a lot of victims. Those are counter-witnesses, terrible, awful counter-witnesses of people against the church. And you have to remember that these people, there were families that were totally undone, that were torn. So it brings us to a profound humility when we bring our message, because we never know how the person was touched, was impacted by that. Of course, God sees the hearts and sees it all. But I would, if I take the victims, I'm not talking specifically about the case that happened in Quebec this week, but at all times, and particularly in Canada, as very often they didn't feel they were listened to. I would like us to have a few moments of silence for these victims who often saw their family destroyed by church people. Of course, each of us, we have our crosses to bear, but we can wonder, how can we find the strength with so many wounded people? But at the same time, I am someone who's been working for more than 10 years for the church, and I see that in between the shadow and the light prevails. Light is everywhere. It takes so much space. It inhabits the people who make the church, who work in the church. I'm so happy to be part of that church and to be proud to keep my head high, because when we look at our heritage, there's a lot more positive points than negative. Let's keep that humility, because the church may have wounded some people, but let's also have that pride that we are the bearers of the message of Christ, the message of Jesus Christ, and we are called upon to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. So how can we be these messengers?
How can we be the messengers in the media? Well, the media, they have a hard time understanding still our ways of doing things. Watch this video. There's a advertising agency in Montreal. They put up a video during the period before Christmas. They would invent as if it was a pitch for priests in Paris to change things for the liturgy and to be more relevant, for up to date, let's say. We don't need to do that. We need to keep our ways of doing things, but renew that. Someone who is very inspiring for me, it's Father Robert Barron. Maybe you know him. Robert Barron is an American priest. Some call him YouTube priest. He puts up a lot of video on YouTube to touch people's heart. Recently he did a great conference, remarkable one, on the 7 keys for a new evangelization. And what's strange about it, well, it's not strange at the same time, but many of the keys he recommends for evangelization can help us bring the message for life in the family. What he says first is to start with the beauty. What is beautiful around us. We're very lucky. Whether it is in the liturgy, in our message, there are many elements of deep beauty. So to start with this beauty, and I look around in the table, many people who are developing beautiful things. As Pope Francis is to not leave aside the doctrine, the notion of truth, but keep the balance between a God of love and God of truth. Start to well, that's a history of the church, beauty that attracted people. First, to discover the face of Jesus. Second point, it's don't dumb down the message you want to share. When I was a young adult, this is why I was so happy to discover the World Youth Days, but in the youth pastoral groups, my heart wanted to touch and find a spiritual family. But the message very often was dumbed down. And what I liked in the conferences and the speeches in these youth days, there was an intellectual message. So it's about faith and reason. It's not everyone who's touched in the same way by this spirit. We have to respect those who are more touched by the message. So don't be afraid to present the intellectual wealth, the doctors, PhDs in our church. And from adolescence, I believe that it is possible to bring up the wealth of our thinkers, Christian and intellectuals. It says also preach with passion. And I think that people here in the room, everywhere where I go, there are less of us, but the workload can be very difficult. But this passion, we can find it. We have to we renew ourselves, take a little bit of a few breaks, but this does exist. He says, he tells about the history of the church, the history of the Holy Scriptures, the Gospel. And talks about Jesus inspiring faith, but just to go and find the roots of the Old Testament to explain the concepts. John Paul II did it beautifully with the theology of the body, and we will see it soon on March 28. On there will be the movie Noah, Hollywood production. It will bring a lot of questions because the producer was talking about the less biblical of the biblical stories or adaptation. So at OCDQ.tv, we prepared pedagogical tools. So just keeping the link with the truth, not to be afraid to go and dig and look in the Old Testaments and the New Testaments for the face of the Christ, who's calling us, of course. Now, the fifth point in these 7 key elements, God needs us and He loves us anyway. We are made for God. Just to repeat these messages, He invites us to use the new media. And so the intervention in the media, I'll tell you about a little story. With my family, I look at The Voice, La Voix, that's the French version of The Voice. It's on the private Québec TV channel. It's a program we all love. And this year, there was a lot of words and bad words at 7 p.m. and a lot of swears. So it was the first time I followed with my family's Star Academy, which is another popular program. Nobody was swearing, but we called the production and producers, and they receive no blame, no complaint, zero complaint. So just a phone call, you see the number or the email of the producer, that way you can find it easily. Nobody complained. And so they said, okay, they were trying as much as possible to show them, but if you saw the program, they tried to reduce the numbers, but there's still a lot. When Éric Lapointe is swearing, this peak hour, I would feel like pressing the button myself and turn him off. But we do have a responsibility as Christians to mention, well, still today, swearing on TV in a family show, maybe it's not the greatest idea. We have to speak up. When a teacher in a school in Sorel decided to forbid the last line of the song of Edith Piaf, God gathers those who love themselves. So many people now mobilized. They called the radio, and so there's a paradox. It was not only Catholic who were calling. People used to see that it's nonsense just deleting this line. So the conscience is there. Society, and I would say, also moderators, hosts, and analysts reacted strongly. We published the next day an ad with this line, God gathers those who love each other, with the logo of Catholic Church. That was really appreciated by people. So to say that, well, if we intervene, people will say, oh, okay, it's about the Catholics, they're just speaking up like in the years 1950s, they just leave us. But sometimes, it's right to step up, and society is ready to accept that. Now, the spring demonstration, as you know, that was an initiative. That was a secular demonstration. It was a parade in spring with physicians, with living with dignity, the group of physicians. And it was very encouraging to look in the crowd, 1,900 people last May 18 in the city of Quebec. Bishops were present. They didn't speak up, but there was this present, just the being there. They were there. It was very strong. Very first time I would see this type of event with such a solidarity with lay people, secular people. And who was present? Well, and were the physicians, but they were not all Christians and Catholics. There were people for whom faith is important, but they were not putting that forth because the argument was not about a religious issue, but there were atheistic, Gnostic people who were there too. And all together, we were able to collectively speak up. So Christian family, well, we would have hoped that, like in the demonstration for all, tens and tens of thousands people would come, but in Quebec, this culture of walking in the street is not as present as it is in Europe and with our French friends. But I was proud to see that people took the time to come and step by step, every time there are mass movements like this, things are going so smoothly. I was very proud to be able to have this kind of witness. Saying, we'll see what will happen with Bill 52 after the election. It will be come up again. But Christian families can count on people who don't share their faith, but they can defend important values concerning families. So we need all sorts of spokespeople. There's an initiative which came up in England. It's called Catholic Voices, to train secular people or spokespeople to go in the media and react. The institutional church can react. Yes, bishops do react once in a while, but those of the public, general public, is very important. And to be able to do it, experts need to support us. Once launched, Catholic Voices came up all over the planet, and hopefully in Canada. Well, there are people in BC, in Hamilton, Toronto. They are reflecting. I can't tell you that there are secular people here in Quebec. They think about developing something similar that would be well adapted to the province of Quebec, to be able to speak up. And last Sunday, by the way, in Saint Thomas d'Aquin Parish, New University Parish, there was an observatory, Justice and Peace. A vicar, a priest of the parish, Martin Lagacé, with young and less younger people, prepared a manifesto. They were going to present it at the Parliamentary Commission on Bill 60 that was cancelled because of the election. So they presented to the parish, and they are thinking about the moment where they will publicly speak up. So please pray for them. There are groups like this, and this is one. who became public since last Sunday. But I can tell you, other groups are bearing this idea of sharing the message, Christian message about the Christian family in the media, mass media. I thought it was impressive. During the elections, their visits in the malls, on the street, people go by the doors, and the only person on issues of secular or freedom of religion who talked to someone. Here it's Mrs. Marois. It's a young Muslim lady. She's 24, and she did it in a great way, brilliant way. She brought her argument, and I thought, well, if it could have been anyone, any political party, it just happened to be her, but this is an electoral campaign right now, so we can speak up and we can ask media travel around and not to jump at someone, but just politely to share. And then it went on the social media, was on the news, and I contacted this lady to thank her. I just wanted to tell her that I thought was remarkable how courageous she was. And I went to see on the social media. It was not something that was part of any group or be mobilized. Never she wrote anything on secularity or, but she found that particular moment. She didn't think she would meet the premier in the mall in Montarville, but it just happened, and she had the courage to walk to her. And there are people from different religions who can help us and share our ideals. So, heads up, we have to recognize these people. The strength of witnessing. The largest conversions is after witnessing and meetings. In Montreal, the Diocese of Montreal, did you see the collections? They have the link I have here. It's a whole set. It's not only the video of Sister Angèle. There are tens and tens of witnessing about the faith that I want you to share in your own environment. There's a lot of various videos. We can see that how Jesus came in the life of people. And I'm astonished by providence. There are converted people there who decided to speak on the TV in Montreal. So we have to take time. And it's simple. What they did, just took one camera and asking people to talk, short 5-minute testimonies. And we wonder how to touch people's heart. Very often it's just to take what they say and in the web to have it shared to the largest number of people possible. There are a few examples of positions taken by different people. As Emily said, I try to have positions with prayer that of what I was called upon last year with the media environment when Cardinal Marc-Aurèle was when I did this press conference. Never the journalists were as clear, because of course they have to be neutral, but they congratulated me and thanked me because they also felt that was nonsense. So journalists just came and thanked me. So that was one of the greatest experiences I have. It was a great experience for me. There's the experience who remember the study saying that believers were less intelligent, lower IQ. So I was on the TV channel to talk about it. And the radio Choix, the famous trash radio in Quebec City. they're very harsh towards religion and the values of Christian families. So I went there a few times, and every time these are the interviews I prefer, because we exactly speak like with anyone in restaurants, with group of friends, new friends, talking, knowing that I'm part of the church. I never bring up the questions of religious. I'm sure that you can see it. So questions come up, they feel like they want to talk. We can feel that there's a void and people want to share. In the morning, with the hosts in Radio X Radio, the same thing. The only interview when I was back from Rome, the Cardinal gave one interview before he was welcome at the Youth Pavilion, was the Trash Radio, Radio X. It was the first time they received a Cardinal. Things went really smoothly. If you have ever have the chance, because I showed it to the youth, and just go ahead, do it. You have to pass it on the youth. Cardinal at Radio X, you don't see that every day. Now, social networks. There are many of them. But the two where we have, and on which we have to focus, is Facebook and Twitter in Quebec and Canada. Media usually talk about Facebook and Twitter. And it was very easy. The participation is democratized. Constantly they go and get comments on Twitter, on Facebook. And people disseminating the values of Christian families are not present on these networks. So I invite you, if you're on Facebook, please take the time, just get on Twitter. It is very easy. You will be able to retweet, as I say, to give importance to messages from other people who move forward this issue of family life. So there's a group of people who are interested, and as far as I'm concerned, the meetings I have on Twitter at the national, international level with people I wouldn't have met otherwise. These are great places to meet people. And there are conversions on social networks. I ask you the question, on Twitter, the Catholic personality or VIP with the highest number of accounts, followers, yes, it's the Cardinal. So Bishop Lacroix has 2,600 followers on Twitter. Well, it's not much compared to 100,000 from Guy Debage and other stars, but they're multipliers, and all the journalists at Quebec follow him. So there's a way to send messages rapidly on Facebook. Who has the highest number of friends? Group or Catholic group or VIP in Quebec? Who would be the top one? Second most popular, Father Raymond Labelle, Gravel. During the last months, he's in a terminal illness. It touched a lot of people. He changed his discourse. It can be provocative sometimes, but I feel that there's something, his last comments on radio and TV moved people. There's something happening, and I continue to pray for Father Gravel. But the top one, so 5,000 people are friends of Raymond Gravel. So the Victory of Love, 105,000. So that's huge. Personally, I'm a bit resistant to that ministry. What is it? Well, it's a televangelical ministry on private channel. But just go and see how they're doing on Facebook. How come they have so many people? So just remember Cardinal Lacroix to 2,600 people, and Victoire de l'Amour. There's the TVA impact, but they communicate very often with images. They share punch messages. So I was very much surprised. There's a company called Sea Vibes with top 10s of media interaction in top 10 of programs in Quebec. Number 1, The Voice, La Voix. Number 2, Victory of Love. This ministry, Victory of Love. So these are people who want to talk about Christian issues and God. So heads up. I mean, objectively, they have succeeded there. So if they succeeded, why can't we? I invite you to go and see their page just to see how they work that around. There's a method. So frequent interaction with the use of images. For social media, people there's something there. They like the visual. It appeals to people. Very simple things, but maybe that would be the key for us. There are trainings, of course. I suggest the one by François Goutney, who's traveling around Quebec. I have the link, PRI Training Center. And what's nice is he's doing a training and he knows about the church everywhere in Canada, in the English part of Canada as well. So on the social networks or on the web in general, it's important to be able, especially in the family environment, to go on the social network to develop, put up all the barriers so that these sad things we see on the web is protected. So I have links here for you if you want. It's free. Search on search engines. These are not miracle tools, but very simple things you can do to ensure that there's a safe environment and prevent pornography to get into your home. I have an important point. It's about teamwork. Many people around the table, they meet once in a while. According to my experience with the church, I see often different groups, pro-life, dioceses, and sometimes even the theme of the conference is to bring our message about life and family in the media. But even in our church, we have work to do to circulate that message. So I think that we need to reflect and review how all the actors here, present here, and those who are not present, how can we work together in a better way to reach out to people in our environment. So I think it's urgent. People need to hear all along the day. Great messages were shared, and unfortunately, we don't hear them, or not enough. So let's think about it. And this is, I have at heart in the next months and years. As a diocese, we need to learn and work in synergy with the different groups. So congratulations to all those who work in the field. I know that it's frustrating sometimes to feel, don't feel that you are being listened to. Are we all working for the same thing? How can we improve? I have a few suggestions for you. Books, websites, and sharing with the media. The UCAT family, they UCAT. They just have the book of confirmation. It's a great tool for teenagers. Maybe you saw it. There's a UCAT. It's a real gem. Version for prayer is the one for confirmation. So that's a great tool. Very well done. And go and watch the videos as well. I invite you. Catholic Voices published How to Defend the Faith. Apologetic is less popular. It's a forbidden word, but to pass on a message, we need the proper tools. So this book by Austin Ivory, which is co-founder of Catholic Voices, is remarkable. Maybe you heard about rumors of canonization of François de Laval and Marie de la Canata. Was a book done by Novalis and Saint-Joie-Longueuil, producer, inhabited by the Word. The inspiration of our founders, saints, and so on. There's something. We have predecessors. They opened the way. And we had living families bearing the message of the Christ.
This is an extremely well-done book. It's well illustrated. It's good for families, and I invite you to buy that book. Of course, The Joy of the Gospel by Pope Francis. I left you also with several websites. Take the time to look at them. I will also left you with this prayer of Charles de Foucault, this prayer of giving up, this prayer of abandonment. It's overhuman, it's superhuman, what we're asked when we are asked to speak about life and families. We're really countercultural. I invite you to say that prayer of abandonment of Blessed Charles de Foucault. You can have it with some 20 languages. It's good to say that prayer. I would like to conclude by this. March 21st is the World Day of Down Syndrome, Trisomy 21. There's a remarkable video that's been circulating now for a few days. I really want to show that video to you because I think that abortion will stop one day, and the Down syndrome, the people with Down syndrome will help us put an end to abortion. When I saw that, I said we have to showcase that because it's total nonsense that 80% of these people are not born. If you haven't seen it, it's 2 minutes long. Le 9 février, nous avons reçu un courriel d'une mère dans sa grossesse. J'attends un enfant, mais j'ai découvert qu'il a la trisomie 21. J'ai peur. Quel genre de vie est-ce que mon enfant va avoir? Aujourd'hui, voici comment nous lui répondons. Ma chère future maman, n'aie pas peur. Ton enfant va être capable de faire beaucoup de choses. Il pourra te prendre dans ses bras. Il pourra courir vers toi. He will be able to study and speak and study. He'll be able to go to school like everybody. Il peut écrire parce que il sera capable de voyager, bien sûr. Il pourra vivre seul aussi. Quelquefois, ça va être difficile, très difficile, mais presque impossible. Chère future maman, ton enfant peut être heureux, comme moi. Pas vrai, maman? Ensemble, on peut rendre tout cela possible. Journée mondiale de la trisomie 21. Tout le monde a le droit d'être heureux. So thank you very much. It's with messages like this one that will be able to change our society. Thank you very much.